Hi, my name's Ben Welsh, and I'm coming to you from the Los Angeles Times newsroom. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to create your first virtual environment for Python code on a Mac OS X computer. Alright, this will take several steps. It will involve using your command line interface, the Python programming language, and the virtualenv tool. So you're going to need to have all of those installed and know how to use them before you can begin. But assuming you do, here's what you do. You take your mouse and you move to the upper right hand corner and click on the search light. There, you're going to want to search for your terminal program, which is the command line interface that lets you talk to your computer. It should come up as a search result. Go ahead and hit enter or double click on it. If you don't see it, you should look for it in your applications folder or elsewhere on your computer. Mine's a little pumped up here with larger fonts so you can see what's happening, but yours will look somewhat similar. Now for the rest of the video, you'll just need to follow along with all the commands that I'm going to use. Alright, just to get you familiar, like a quick command that you probably should know to work on the terminal is one called ls, which will list all the folders in your current directory. So I've typed in ls and hit enter, and you can see that it's printed out a series of folders. I bet these look familiar to you. They have names like applications, documents, downloads, desktop. These are the folders that are found in the home directory of your computer, which is where your terminal is almost always going to start you off. And if you're on Windows instead of an Apple computer, you'll see something similar but slightly different. But it's the same idea. And just to reinforce this, I'm going to go down and visit the Finder, which will explore the file system on the computer. And I'm going to click on the Home folder to take me to that same directory. And here you can see, listed in the Finder, the exact same folders that you see listed there on the terminal. And that's because the terminal is currently operating in the exact same place that we're looking at now in the Finder. If you don't have a home logo over here on Apple computers, sometimes it's hidden away and you have to hit the Go menu at the top here and then the Home button, and that will take you to the same spot that we are now. Alright, so now before we begin, before we even make our first virtual environment to store a specific project of code, it's probably a good idea to create a folder on your computer where all your different projects can go so that you can keep all your code in one place. If you already have this location, go ahead and just move there in the terminal and work there. But if you don't, I'm going to show you how to make one. We've already got these great folders named documents, downloads, movies, music that have different types of stuff. So why not make one for code that's just the same? To do that, we're going to use a command called mkdir, which stands for make directory. And this command, given a folder name, will create a new folder wherever you happen to be. So since the other folders are capital D desktop and capital D documents and so on, I'm going to name my new folder capital C code. Then if I hit enter, nothing happens, that's good. And I hit the ls button, you'll now see that code is a folder in this directory. And if I go back to the Finder, we'll see that code now is there as well. I can click in and it's empty. Alright, now let's move into that new folder using the cd command for change directory. If you type cd space code, that will move your terminal into that new folder that we just created, which again, by typing ls, I can confirm is empty. There's nothing there, just like we saw in the Finder. Next, we're going to use the virtualenv command to create a private Python environment to store all the Python tools and things we're going to need to work on the project. To do that, we're going to need another command which is called virtualenv. If you type virtualenv space, it then is going to expect a name where you can store all the Python tools that are about to come in. Now, this tutorial was developed for a larger series called First Python Notebook to teach you how to use a Jupyter Notebook and the Python programming language. So I'm going to call my folder the same thing, First Python Notebook. But since it's a folder on a computer, it probably shouldn't have spaces in the name. So I'm going to name it First Python Notebook. You should do the same. Virtualenv space First Python Notebook. Go ahead and type that in and hit enter. The terminal should spit out a couple things telling you what it's doing. It's trying to install some Python tools into that new directory, and it finishes and looks like everything went well. We can see what happened by returning to the Finder. And now there's a new folder called First Python Notebook. And if I click into it, I can see that it's installed several other folders into that same directory. This is the furniture that comes with every virtual environment. And it's stuff that you don't need to worry about all that much, but it's tools that you're going to use once you're inside. Now, the most important stuff is in the bin folder. These are different programs that have been installed. And you can see that there's a whole different version of the Python programming language that's been installed just for this virtual environment. And that's so it can run independent of all the other Python code on your computer and won't bump into any different versions of software or lack anything that it needs to run all on its own, which is really great for when you have lots of different projects on your computer, when you need to install your code on a different computer, maybe one of your colleagues needs to install it, or maybe even you need to install it on a server that's on the internet. If all the Python tools and everything necessary to run your code are packaged together as part of a virtual environment, then things can just sort of work and be easily installable in other places in sort of a modular fashion. And that's one of the reasons that virtualenv is so popular. All right? So we have all the basic stuff that comes with the virtualenv, but there's one more thing we need to do before we begin using it. Just because all those files are there in the folder doesn't mean your computer's taking advantage of them. When you are working inside a virtual environment, you only need to create it once, like we just did. But each and every time you begin working on the code and running the code, you need to turn it on. You need to activate the virtual environment so that your computer is using these alternative versions of Python and its tools instead of the default stuff that's installed on your computer with everything else. Again, this is called activation, and it's done by running the activate command that's inside this bin folder. To do that, we're going to go back to our terminal, and we're going to navigate into this new directory we've created, which again is using the cd command for change directory. cd space first hyphen Python hyphen notebook, and then enter will move us into that directory. Again, I can type ls and hit enter, and I can see listed those folders we were just looking at in the Finder. Now, if you're on Windows, it probably won't be called bin. It will be called scripts instead, but it's the same idea. It's just a different name. Now, that activate file in the bin folder is what we need to run, which remember we can see in the Finder right here. Inside the bin folder is a file called activate. To run that, we're going to use a program called source, which is a built-in utility on your computer that can run computer programming scripts for your terminal. So we're going to type source space. Now, because the file's in the bin folder, we're going to type bin / activate. And that will tell your computer, run that activate file inside the bin folder with the source program. All right, I'm going to hit enter. Boom, nothing happened. It went to the next line. That's very good. You will probably notice, this can vary by computer, but you will probably notice something like this, a prefix at the front of your terminal, which is the name of your virtual environment. That's a good sign that things have been successful. That means that your computer is now operating inside this environment as opposed to using the standard tools installed elsewhere on your computer. Now, if you're on a Windows computer, the command will have been slightly different. Just to take a quick little side path here, you will have instead had to have typed cd scripts and then moved inside the scripts directory and hit enter. So cd scripts and enter to move into that scripts directory. You'll then will have wanted to run source activate, right, to run that activate file. And then you'll need to navigate back up one directory to the folder that I'm in now, out of the scripts directory by doing cd space ... and enter. All right? All right, so go ahead and do that, and you should see the same thing. You should see the first Python notebook appear as a prefix or something like it. But one way that people on all operating systems can now verify that the virtual environment has worked is to use another command, which will be the last command we learn in this lesson, which is called which. And which is a program you can run to ask your computer which version of a program are you running if I type it in. And the program we're interested in is called Python. And so if I type which space Python and type enter, you can see that it's returning a file directory path that leads from my home folder into the code directory we've created, into the virtual environment we've created inside that, and then into the bin folder there where the Python program was installed by virtualenv. And that's exactly what we want. You want to see something like this, which again says that your computer is going to use the virtualenv's version of Python rather than the system's version. Okay, that's everything we're going to cover in this lesson, but we should do a little bit of practice before we finish. All right? Creating the virtual environment and the code directory was a one-time thing. You only have to do when you're starting a new project or configuring a new computer. But activating your virtual environment is something you need to do each and every time that you log into your computer and use the terminal to work on the code. So let's close our terminal and reopen it and then reactivate our environment just to practice how that happens. Okay, so I'm going to go to the upper corner and I'm going to quit the terminal. I'm going to close my Finder. I'm going to go back to the Spotlight. And again, I'm going to type in terminal to open up the terminal program and hit enter. So now I'm back at a blank terminal. And every time you open a terminal, it starts fresh. And I can tell in this case by typing which Python again, asking the computer which version of Python you're running. And you can see that this time it's returned something different. It's returned a path to a deep down location into my computer where Python was installed by the Mac OS operating system. This is the global version of Python that you could use by default. But that's not what we want to use when we're inside our virtual environment. So to check back in, we'll need to navigate back into those folders that we created and activate the environment. So again, we're going to use cd to change directory into the code directory we created, which if we ls, we can see has our first Python notebook folder in it. I'm going to use cd again to go into first Python notebook, and I'm going to type enter. If I type ls again, you can see all those folders that were created earlier. And now finally, I'm going to type source bin/activate. The prefix has appeared on my terminal, and if I type which Python, you can see that this time it's returned a different answer, which is the path to the Python executable inside my virtual environment. If all this has worked, congratulations, you've installed and created and activated your first virtual environment.